Coming up on this episode, the latest from Steve Kerr on Jonathan Kuminga and what it could mean for the 22-year-old and his future with the Warriors as he prepares for restricted free agency. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Less than an hour after the Oklahoma City Thunder defeated the Minnesota Timberwolves in Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. A little bit disappointing watching on from a Warrior perspective, thinking that, well, this could have been us and we might have been able to put up a little bit more of a challenge than what the Timberwolves have in the first two games where they've suffered double-digit defeats in both. Kind of has gone the way I expected it. I wasn't overly impressed with Minnesota in the second round series against the Warriors, even though they actually won that obviously in 5 fairly comfortably after Steph Curry's hamstring injury, but not overly impressed, and obviously just coming up against a better team right now in the Thunder, who I think are better than the Warriors defensively, particularly with the way that Draymond kind of ended his playoff campaign, looked tired, looked weary, not having the same defensive impact as he normally would. So it's kind of going to script for me, and I'd expect the Thunder to probably close it out maybe in 5, maybe grab one of the next 2 in Minnesota and then close it out on their home floor in 5. I'm much more interested in the Pacers-Knicks series out east, which had an extraordinary finish in Game 1. Indiana continued to just produce these memorable, ridiculous comebacks in the final minutes of games, and that was, again, the case yesterday. An unbelievable performance from them, an unbelievable performance from Tyrese Halliburton, who I want to put it out there. Like, I love Tyrese Halliburton. I don't get the hate for him. I guess some of his stuff is classified as corny somewhat, but he just backs it up. Like, he talks the talk, but he also walks the walk, and he's done it now 2 years in a row here in the playoffs and in some of the game's biggest moments. And that shot the end of regulation yesterday, it could have easily backfired on him. The whole choking celebration had the Pacers gone on to lose that game in overtime. But man, he has just made some incredible shots. And the idea of him as an overrated player, I don't buy into it. And I love him as a player. I think he'd be a perfect fit on the Warriors, and obviously disappointed that we didn't take him higher up, number 2 overall in the 2020 draft, because he would have been a perfect fit right now, must be said, next to Steph Curry and potentially Jimmy Butler and Draymond and whatnot. I think he's got that great combination of three-point shooting and also obviously just that, old school kind of point guard mentality of getting guys open shots and seeing the floor so well. So I don't know. I said the Pacers would win that series, and obviously based on Game 1, I'm sticking with that. But I can easily see that going 6 or 7. It's certainly, I think, got the makings of a much more exciting series than what we're seeing out west. I want to get on to the Warriors, though. Just a few quick things, bits of information over the last couple of days here before I get into more about Jonathan Kuminga and his restricted free agency. So, first of all, congratulations to those that have received votes or received honors in a few different awards, obviously, over the last couple of days. So, Steph got a couple of MVP votes or something like that, I think. So, congratulations to him. Quentin Post missed out on all-rookie second team, but he got 4 second-team votes there. So, well done to him. Obviously, an impressive season from the rookie center, and Draymond obviously finishing 4th in overall votes for all rookie teams, which means he finished clearly in the all defensive first team, I should say. So well done to Draymond on that one. Also came out earlier today that Moses Moody has undergone surgery for a torn UCL. That's a torn ligament in his right thumb. Something that didn't really come up too much, like it wasn't generally on the injury report or anything like that throughout the playoffs. And it just makes me wonder how much that may have impacted his performances in the playoffs, where his form obviously diminished to the point where he was basically an afterthought for Steve Kerr in the final game of the season there, Game 5 against the Timberwolves. He didn't see playing time until the last quarter, played the final 12 minutes, but otherwise there are 11 guys used before Moses Moody in that Game 5. So I do wonder how much that torn ligament in his thumb would have made an impact, particularly on his shooting. I was looking at the numbers earlier today. In the 12 games starting after the All-Star break, Moses shot 45.8%, I think it was, from 3-point range on nearly 5 attempts per game. From that point on, in the final 15 games of the regular season, he shot 30%. And then it was only just a little bit above that. I think he shot 35% from the floor overall during the playoffs, and I think 33.3% from 3-point range. So I haven't yet found out at what point that injury actually came through, but it would make some sense that would impact his shooting. And I just think his game in general lost confidence. And if you lose confidence in your shooting as a young player, and that's your primary skill set, that's what he's there for, right? He's there to hit open shots. If you lose confidence in that, it doesn't surprise me that he necessarily lost confidence in his game in general. And obviously that got to the point where he went from being a bona fide starter for the Warriors to a guy that was essentially almost unplayable and out of the rotation. So maybe that provides some answers for us on why Moses struggled so much over the course of really the last 25 games, if you go back to the final 15 games of the regular season. But I'm sure some more information may come out on that as time passes and the offseason progresses here. But it sounds like he's going to be more than ready to go for training camp if he's not traded, obviously, in the offseason, which I think the form toward the end of the playoffs did make him a trade candidate of sorts here in the offseason, and potentially so, given that mid-tier contract that he's now on. He's starting that 3-year, $37.5 million extension. But also the Warriors might just believe in, hey, that's a really team-friendly contract, and there is a legitimate reason, legitimate excuse in terms of the injury as to why his form fell away so dramatically across the final weeks of the season. So we'll wait and see what happens with Moses Moody, but he should be fit, ready, and available to go for training camp when that starts up in October. Alrighty, let's get on to the Kuminga stuff here. Steve Kerr has spoken a lot in the last few days here, or at least of what's come out in the last couple of days here in regard to Jonathan Kuminga, because obviously that's the biggest question facing the Warriors right now, and therefore that's the biggest question that anyone to do with the Warriors is going to face from the media here until there's a resolution once free agency hits or whatnot. We'll wait and see what happens. But Steve's been very honest, I think, in his responses to some of these questions, and that's great. Like, we love honesty and candidness. That's absolutely fantastic. So I want to applaud Steve for that. But I think there's also some things in here that would suggest to you that, hey, JK's future with the Warriors is certainly on its way to ending, you would imagine. I think that was probably already the case, has already been leaning that way in recent weeks anyway. And then we had the reports after the Warriors season ended, both from The Athletic and ESPN, that Golden State and Jonathan Kuminga's camp would be exploring sign and trade scenarios this offseason. But some of Steve's comments here would suggest to me that this is a player that the Warriors are now fairly willing to part ways with, so long, of course, as they get something reasonably valuable in return in a sign and trade scenario, which could be complicated because one part of this that I haven't mentioned in any of the post-game lives or anything is the fact that only 50%, I think, of Kuminga's new contract counts as outgoing salary. Therefore, so if he makes $30 million, it's only $15 million that the Warriors can kind of get back in the trade. Of course, they can aggregate other salaries on top of that to get more and whatnot, but it does make it a little bit complicated here. I just want to get into, again, some of Steve's comments. So first of all, we had a pretty notable interview with Tim Kawakami on his podcast, The TK Show. And a couple of the things here were really interesting. So this is a full quote from Steve. Said, "I've been asked to win, and right now he's not a guy who I can say I'm going to play 38 minutes with the roster that we have. Steph and Jimmy and Draymond, and put the puzzle together that way and expect to win. Doesn't mean he's not a really good player. Doesn't mean he's not talented. It just means the fit. And with the roster that we have, it is tricky." Okay, he would go on to label JK a ball-dominant player, brought up a statistic of usage rate that I'm not really sure where that came from, but whatever. And also gave some comparisons on players that JK should try to emulate with Aaron Gordon and Sean Marion, right? So saying that you can't play him for heavy minutes when you're trying to win, that's not great. However you want to slice and cut. And this is not to say that any of these comments from Steve are wrong by any means. They're not wrong, but it's just interesting for the head coach to admit these things of a player, a talented young player who we just saw led Golden State in scoring over the final 4 games of the playoffs and did so very efficiently, it must be said. He averaged 24.3 points or something like that on over 55% shooting from the floor. So to me, there's a couple of things here. The first of all, the comparisons to Aaron Gordon, right, and Sean Marion. So I want to look at Aaron Gordon because he's a contemporary, right? He's playing in the league right now. We've seen what he's developed into most recently here over the last few years. Obviously, a very similar situation. I get the comparison from Steve. He's absolutely right. But can Jonathan Kuminga develop into an Aaron Gordon type player for the Warriors? If he could, that'd be fantastic. Aaron Gordon, a long, productive career. He's going to make a lot of money, right? So having an Aaron Gordon career, this is not to disparage Aaron Gordon in any way. He's one of the most valuable role players in the league. But right now, at 22 years old, Jonathan Kuminga is not, right, is not dreaming of becoming Aaron Gordon, right? He's dreaming of becoming more than that, of becoming a multi-time All-Star. And I think, based on what we saw over the last 4 games of the playoffs, I think that's still a reasonable dream to have. Like, that's not completely unrealistic. Like, this guy scored 30 points in a high-stakes playoff game. You have to be supremely talented to be able to do that, right? To do what he did over the last 4 games of the playoffs, I think is a real credit to him and goes to show you what kind of stature he can get to as a player, right? But he doesn't want to be Aaron Gordon right now. He wants to be able to spread his wings and explore his potential. And I think every young player, particularly as a former top 10 pick, has the right to be able to say that, has the right to be able to say, no, like, I don't want to be pigeonholed into something less than what I could be, right? And it's just unfortunate. This is just the circumstance of Jonathan Kuminga being drafted to a team that's looking to win a championship. He hasn't necessarily got, and we've spoken relentlessly about this, he hasn't got that opportunity to spread his wings and truly realize or explore his potential and what he can become in the league. When Aaron Gordon was traded from the Orlando Magic to the Denver Nuggets, he was 6.5 years into his career and 25 years old, right? That's probably the point of which you could say, all right, I've had my opportunity. I've had a number of years here to really try and explore my potential. It hasn't quite come together. Now let me settle into something different, right? And I heard Marcus Thompson say I can't remember what the podcast was the other day, but a clip's gone viral basically where Marcus Thompson of The Athletic said that, if you're the Warriors, you try and ask JK to wait it out, right? Just wait it out till after the Steph era. I don't think that's possible because in the meantime, I don't think he can necessarily get on the same page with the franchise in terms of being a valuable player as like a third option beyond Steph and Jimmy, who rebounds, runs the floor hard, plays hard defense, all these different things, right? Okay, I think he needs the opportunity to be able to go out and be a ball-dominant guy, as Steve labeled him as. And he doesn't necessarily get that in the Warriors system right now. And I think it's really interesting because when you say ball-dominant guy, there's a cutoff point. Because every great player, or not every great player, but a lot of the best players in the league, right, are ball-dominant guys. They're the best guys in the league, so you put the ball in their hands the majority of the time. At some point, there's a cutoff, though, where if you're not within the top 25 players in the league and you're labeled a ball-dominant guy, that's a problem, right? That's a problem because if you're a ball-dominant guy but you're not one of the best 25 players in the league, then you're not taking your team to a championship, and therefore, what are you really doing? It's kind of the same conversation I had in regard to Josh Giddey on the post-game live earlier in the week. So, to me, Jonathan Kuminga, I think, has the right to say that, hey, I want to go spread my wings. I want to get this opportunity. Obviously, financially, he just wants to make the most money possible as well, which is absolutely within his right. And I think equally the Warriors are right in saying, hey, we're not going to prioritize you over Steph Curry. We're not going to prioritize you over Jimmy Butler. So to me, I don't think there's anyone... Now, could you blame Steve Kerr for part of this? Yeah, absolutely. I think the way he's developed young talent, and DeMarcus Cousins came out the other day and criticized him for it, the way he's developed young talent is a problem. Okay, absolutely. Is there also some blame on JK for not accepting more of a role player kind of stature within the Warriors system in terms of, again, playing off Steph and Jimmy, being able to rebound at a high level, being able to defend at a high level consistently, which he's shown he's capable of doing, but he hasn't done it consistently enough. So I think both sides have some part of the blame here if we're creating a blame pie. I think too much of it we see on social media is, everyone blaming Steve for it, or people saying that JK is just no good, that he's useless. I don't think both sides, I think, of the argument, at the end of the day, you've got to come to a balance, right? I think when there's two widely contrasting views, the answer's normally in the middle, and that's what I think it is. I think it's just a case of an unfortunate scenario where the player and franchise are not on the same page, and both of them take a little bit of the blame in that. And Steve went on to say to 95.7 The Game's Will and Dibbs just a few hours ago, he was asked directly whether there was a disagreement between, the coaching staff and JK in terms of the way that he wants to play. And Steve's response was, I don't think there's a disagreement. I think that there is maybe a different view from his perspective and what he's comfortable doing. So he's just, I don't really get that comment, because he said, I don't think there's a disagreement, and then says there's a different view. Well, therefore, that's the same thing, in my opinion. There is a contrast. There's a contrast in the way that Jonathan Kuminga wants to play, and a contrast in the way that, the Warriors want him to play. And again, at the end of the day, it's a team game. It comes down to winning basketball. And therefore, I think Kuminga does deserve some of the blame in this. Could the Warriors have put him in better positions to be able to kind of motivate him to play in a way they want to by, giving some more grace in terms of playing time and stuff like that? Absolutely. So again, it comes down to, I think there's two sides of the argument here. And they both probably, player and franchise, or player and Steve Kerr, does deserve some kind of blame in this scenario. The other thing that Steve said, he was asked, does JK want to leave the Warriors? And one interesting thing he said at the end of his response to Will and Dibbs was, every player, every young player, even the older guys, they want to fit in well with what's happening. And so I think there's got to be part of JK that thinks about going elsewhere. Again, that's honesty, and I love that. But to me, if you are hell-bent on wanting a player to stay, I don't think you even open up the possibility of him entertaining something else. I wouldn't be saying that publicly. Would Steve publicly say that, I think there's going to be a part of Steph that thinks about going elsewhere? I don't think you'd say that about a player that you really want to keep. Okay, and you guys let me know, maybe I'm reading too much into that. But again, I think that just goes to suggest that, hey, we're not totally against bringing him back, but we also acknowledge that the fit here is incredibly tricky, that what we're trying to do and what the player's trying to do in their own career is different. Right now, we're not exactly on the same page, and therefore, if we can get something of value in return for him, then we're going to explore it. And that's probably going to be the most likely outcome here. So Jonathan Kuminga's free agency is clearly going to dominate. We're going to have plenty more of discussion around this, but I've really found it interesting Steve's open and honest comments on Kuminga, and him acknowledging that, hey, yeah, there's a problem here. There's a problem in the way that he sees his future and sees the way he wants to play in comparison to how we want him to play as the coaching staff and as the franchise, right? So credit to Steve for that, but I think it just goes to reiterate further that, hey, Jonathan Kuminga's time with the Warriors is probably coming to an end, and therefore now it might be more about, okay, what can the Warriors get back in a potential sign trade? I'm not going to get into that on this episode. There'll be plenty more. I'll do some more post-game lives as the conference finals go along here in the next few days. We can talk about potential sign and trade scenarios. We can talk about anything you want the Warriors to do in the off-season, free agency trades, anything like that. But I'll save that for then. Until then, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. You can see my daily coverage, writing-wise, over on bluemanhoop.com as well. Currently Friday here, Australian time. So for those in Australia that are preparing for the weekend, hope you have a good one. I'll be back in the next few days for a post-game live. I'll certainly give you guys plenty of notice. It was a little bit different here doing a podcast episode, which I haven't done for a while, but it's been a good one nonetheless. And let me know your thoughts on the Jonathan Kuminga Golden State scenario, whether you can see him coming back to the Warriors, or what you think the Warriors should be doing in terms of a sign and trade scenario, and what you make of Steve Kerr's comments, right? Were they refreshingly honest, or does he need to take more blame in this scenario? You let me know. I think it's one of the more divisive topics, and JK's role and playing time has been one of the more divisive topics across the Warrior fan base over the last couple of years, not just this year, but really going back to probably his second season, more than anything, when we had the likes of Anthony Lamb playing over JK, which was certainly a talking point at the time. Until the next post-game live, guys, or the next podcast episode, thank you very much for your ongoing support.